When the stars began to fall and ancient civilizations crumbled into silence across the universe, Earth remained oblivious. The planet spun quietly in its corner of the Milky Way, nurturing its chaotic but persistent human race who remained unaware of the greater collapse unfolding beyond their skies. For centuries unknown to humans, the grand civilizations of the cosmos had thrived, empires built across solar systems, alliances woven through light years of trust and conflict. They were beings of impossible technology, architects of stellar engines and keepers of ancient wisdom. They believed themselves invincible, but they were wrong. A force darker than anything they had encountered before spread from the deep void between galaxies, a force that consumed worlds not by fire or war but by unraveling the very laws of physics and life itself. They called it the Shroud, a creeping infection of reality that once touched could never be undone. Systems fell one after another, their shining cities blinking out as if they had never existed. Desperate, the greatest minds gathered at the core assembly, a final council of remaining civilizations. They scoured their ancient prophecies, their lost sciences, and their forbidden archives for any hope. In their desperation they found a whisper, an ancient warning from a time before their own civilizations had risen, a prophecy that spoke of a young world, a chaotic species marked by resilience and defiance, a species unremarkable by cosmic standards yet unique in their sheer stubbornness to survive against all odds, a species that if reached before the final fall might hold the key to resisting the Shroud. The world was Earth and the species was humanity. But reaching Earth was not simple. The Shroud had already carved vast scars through the galaxy, cutting off safe passages and devouring entire sectors. Those few who tried to reach the blue planet failed, their vessels lost to the darkness before they could send a single warning. Among the last survivors was an ancient race known as the Thalkiri, tall and silver-skinned with minds honed over 1 billion years. They had built wonders beyond imagination, yet when the Shroud came even their strongest fortresses crumbled in moments. Despair gripped them until their last council chose a path of madness and hoped. They would send one ship, one last attempt to reach Earth, carrying their final archive of knowledge and the faint hope that humanity could be their salvation. The vessel named Solace was not built for war or speed. It was a cradle of knowledge and history filled with the wisdom of countless fallen worlds. On board, the few surviving Thalkiri placed everything they could not bear to see lost, the hopes of trillions, the songs of forgotten stars, the blueprints of marvels that could bend the fabric of time itself. At the edge of a dying system, Solace prepared for its impossible journey. Meanwhile on Earth, life continued in its messy, vibrant way. Wars flared and faded, technology surged and stumbled forward, dreams were born and crushed in the endless churn of human ambition. Humanity fought itself, loved itself, and never realized that it was being watched from the edges of a collapsing universe. Among them was Dr. Elara Vance, an astrophysicist whose obsession with deep space anomalies had made her a quiet outcast among her peers. Night after night she scanned the skies looking for patterns others dismissed. She saw the strange disappearances of distant stars, the irregular gravitational shifts, the way parts of the sky seemed to dim not with distance but with absence. Her warnings were ignored by governments and scientific councils alike, who labeled her a doomsayer drunk on apocalyptic fantasies. But she kept watching because something in her bones told her that the universe was changing in ways no one wanted to admit. Then one night her array picked up a signal. It was faint, almost buried under cosmic noise, a series of pulses, structured and deliberate, the signature of intelligence. Elara almost dismissed it at first, thinking it was another glitch, another cruel illusion, but something in the pattern caught her attention, a rhythm, a desperation that felt almost human. She spent hours decoding it line by line, pulse by pulse, until she realized it was a message, a warning and a plea. The signal originated from just beyond the Oort cloud and it was heading toward Earth. Elara knew then with a certainty that shook her to her core that humanity was not alone and that whatever was coming was either salvation or doom. Without waiting for approval, she broadcast the findings across every channel she could reach, knowing that few would believe her but praying that anyone would listen. Far beyond her world, hidden behind veils of collapsing space, Solace moved steadily forward, chased by the hungering darkness. The race had begun and Earth's role in the fate of the universe was about to be revealed. The signal reached Earth with a whimper, buried in the noise of 1,000 transmissions, unnoticed by most. Yet, Dr. Elara Vance knew that the pulse she had intercepted was not just another anomaly. The message was clear, structured, and urgent. She had no way of knowing who had sent it or why, but one thing was certain: something was happening in the cosmos, something catastrophic, and Earth was somehow connected. Elara's revelation sent ripples through the scientific community, though few believed her at first. The governments of Earth were more concerned with their own squabbles, fighting over resources, political power, and territorial disputes. But Elara persisted, reaching out to anyone who would listen, desperate to find answers. She shared her findings with the few trusted colleagues she had left, hoping they might see the same signs she had. It wasn't until a team of astrophysicists in a distant observatory on the other side of the world picked up the same signal that her warning started to gain traction. The recognition of the pattern sent shockwaves through the scientific community. The pulse wasn't just a coincidence, it was a deliberate transmission, and it was coming from somewhere beyond the reach of any known technology. Worse, it was not just a call for help, but a warning of something far darker, a force that could erase the universe itself. For a brief moment, humanity united. Leaders, scientists, and military experts gathered in secret meetings, trying to decode the message and understand what it meant. But the message was fragmented, cryptic, and no one could fully comprehend the extent of what it was implying. Earth, once considered a fringe world, had somehow become a focal point in a cosmic struggle between life and the Shroud, a dark force that had already devoured entire civilizations. Days turned into weeks, and still no one had a clear explanation. The transmissions continued, growing more frantic, as if the sender knew that time was running out. The situation grew more desperate as the gravitational anomalies Elara had predicted began to show signs of increased intensity. Entire sectors of the galaxy seemed to be slipping out of alignment, stars vanishing into nothingness, and whole systems blinking out of existence. Then, just as Earth's leaders were beginning to feel the weight of the cosmic crisis bearing down on them, the Thalkiri ship, Solace, made its final approach. From the moment Solace entered the Earth system, it was clear that the ship was unlike anything humanity had ever seen. Its hull shimmered with a silvery glow, impossibly sleek and elegant, a design that defied all human understanding of engineering. The ship was vast, larger than any human-made craft, but it moved through space as if it was a part of the fabric of the cosmos itself, bending the stars around it in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. The arrival of Solace triggered a massive global response. Earth's defenses were scrambled, but there was no way to intercept or communicate with the vessel. It seemed to drift in and out of focus, as if it were not entirely present in the physical world. When it finally made contact, it was through a transmission broadcast directly to every major network on Earth. The voice that emerged from the speaker was unlike anything humans had ever heard. It wasn't human, and it wasn't mechanical. It had a haunting resonance, as if 1,000 voices were speaking at once, but with a clarity that sent a chill down the spine of anyone who listened. People of Earth, the voice began, we are the Thalkiri. We are not your enemies, nor your saviors. We are the last remnants of those who fell before you. We bring you knowledge, and we bring you the truth. The Shroud is coming. It is not a plague or a war, but an erasure of reality itself. You must prepare. You must listen. The message was filled with sorrow, a sadness that seemed to come from the very fabric of the universe itself. The Thalkiri spoke of the ancient civilizations they had once been a part of, civilizations that had stood at the forefront of the galaxy's history, only to be consumed by the Shroud. They spoke of their failed attempts to stop it, their eventual exile to the edge of the galaxy, and their desperate search for a species that might have the potential to fight back. We found you, the voice continued. And we have brought you everything we know. You are humanity, the last hope. Elara, sitting alone in her lab, watched the transmission unfold with wide eyes. It was everything she had feared, and everything she had hoped for. The message was not just a plea for help, it was a declaration. Earth was no longer a backwater world, no longer insignificant in the grand scheme of the universe. It was now the final battleground in the war for survival. But what did humanity have to offer? Earth was still a world divided by war, greed, and mistrust. How could such a fractured species stand against a force that had already wiped out civilizations far more advanced than theirs? As the broadcast ended, a single question hung in the air, unanswered. What was humanity willing to do to save the universe? The choice was now in their hands, and the clock was ticking. The message from the Thalkiri reverberated through every corner of Earth. People watched in awe and disbelief as the truth began to sink in. Across the globe, governments scrambled to understand the implications of the broadcast. Some were skeptical, dismissing it as an elaborate hoax, while others felt the weight of the message pressing down on them. The Shroud, an unstoppable force that had erased entire civilizations, was coming, and Earth had been chosen as the last hope. Dr. Elara Vance found herself thrust into the center of the world's most important mission. She had been the first to detect the anomaly, the first to realize that something was wrong in the universe. Now, she was the leading voice in the global effort to understand the Thalkiri's message and decipher their knowledge. The Thalkiri had promised to share everything they knew, but how could humanity, a species just beginning to explore the stars, possibly make sense of it all? Despite the skepticism of many, the message had sparked an unprecedented unity among Earth's nations. Leaders from every corner of the world gathered in secret, pooling their resources, scientists, and military forces. The realization that the universe's fate rested on Earth's shoulders weighed heavily on their minds, and the task before them seemed impossible. Elara was appointed as the head of an international research team, tasked with studying the Thalkiri's archives and preparing humanity for the impending arrival of the Shroud. The team was a mix of astrophysicists, engineers, military strategists, and philosophers, all working in the shadow of a cosmic disaster that no one fully understood. The Thalkiri, despite their advanced technology, had failed to stop the Shroud. Their archives contained vast knowledge of the universe, but they offered no simple solution. Instead, they provided clues, fragments of ancient wisdom that seemed to point to a hidden truth, a force or technology that might be able to counter the Shroud. Yet, these clues were not straightforward. They were riddles, scattered across different galaxies, each one tied to a different piece of the cosmic puzzle. For days, Elara and her team worked around the clock, analyzing the Thalkiri data and searching for a pattern, a breakthrough. The knowledge they uncovered was overwhelming: alien languages, lost technologies, and strange mathematical equations that defied the very laws of physics as humans understood them. But even as they made progress, doubts began to creep in. The task before them felt insurmountable. How could a species so young, so fragmented, possibly stand up to a force that had already destroyed entire civilizations? Elara, however, refused to give up. She couldn't. The message had been clear: humanity was the final hope. She saw something in humanity that the Thalkiri had seen, a unique resilience, a refusal to bow to impossible odds. She began to focus on this, on the very thing that made humanity different from the ancient, long-gone civilizations that had already fallen to the Shroud: their capacity for innovation, their unyielding will to survive, and their ability to adapt. Meanwhile, Solace, the Thalkiri ship, hovered just outside Earth's atmosphere, awaiting instructions. The Thalkiri had offered their assistance, but there was no guarantee that their technology could be integrated into humanity's existing infrastructure. Despite their advanced knowledge, they had failed against the Shroud, and there were no assurances that they could turn the tide. Humanity would have to rely on its own strength and ingenuity. In the coming weeks, Elara began to realize that the key to humanity's survival might not lie in advanced technology or ancient alien wisdom. It might lie in something far simpler: a unity that transcended borders, races, and ideologies. For the first time in history, Earth's nations began to set aside their differences and collaborate on a common goal. Governments that had once been at odds now shared resources, knowledge, and military power. The global cooperation that had once seemed impossible became a reality, driven by the urgency of the impending crisis. But as Earth prepared for the coming storm, another problem loomed large. The Shroud was drawing closer. Its presence was now undeniable, its effects beginning to ripple across space. Stars were dying at an alarming rate, entire systems were vanishing, and strange gravitational anomalies were appearing in the solar system. Elara and her team worked tirelessly, analyzing the data and trying to make sense of the patterns, but every day brought more questions than answers. Then, as if to confirm the growing threat, a massive cosmic event occurred. A distant star, once a beacon of light in a neighboring galaxy, suddenly blinked out of existence. It wasn't just a supernova or a collapsing black hole, it was as if the star had been erased from reality entirely, leaving no trace behind. The Shroud had reached it, and its hunger was growing. This event, known as the Vanishing, sent shockwaves through the global community. It was the first tangible proof that the Shroud was real and that it was coming for Earth. As the world watched in horror, the Thalkiri offered one final piece of their wisdom: a map, a series of coordinates scattered across the galaxy, that pointed to the location of the last known artifact capable of resisting the Shroud. The artifact was located on a planet in a distant system, a planet long abandoned by the ancient civilizations. The Valkyrie believed it held the key to the Shroud's defeat, but they had been unable to reach it in time. Elara stood at the forefront of this new mission. The map was their only lead, and the clock was ticking. Humanity's chance to save itself, and the universe, rested on finding this artifact before the Shroud reached Earth. The fate of everything was now in the hands of a small group of humans who had to venture beyond the known cosmos into the heart of darkness itself. With the vanishing of the distant star still fresh in the minds of Earth's citizens, Elara and her team were thrust into the heart of a new, desperate mission. The coordinates provided by the Valkyrie led to a distant, forgotten world, a planet that lay beyond the galactic fringe, far from Earth's reach, where the Shroud had not yet arrived. If the artifact they sought truly held the key to defeating the Shroud, it was humanity's only hope. But time was running out. The global coalition formed in the wake of the Valkyrie's arrival quickly marshaled its resources. A fleet was assembled, a mix of human-made ships and the advanced Valkyrie technology now integrated into Earth's forces. The fleet would journey beyond the known reaches of the galaxy, toward the uncharted system where the artifact lay hidden. Among them was the Solace, still hovering near Earth, providing guidance and support, its ancient crew now working alongside Earth's finest minds. The journey ahead would be perilous. The Shroud was growing stronger, and the unknown forces that had wiped out entire civilizations could be felt on the edges of space itself. Every ship that ventured toward the unknown regions of the galaxy would have to pass through regions now warped and twisted by the Shroud's influence, areas where the very fabric of reality had been altered. Gravitational anomalies, time distortions, and unnatural spatial shifts made travel incredibly hazardous. Many believed it was impossible to reach the distant planet at all. But Elara, driven by the knowledge that the future of the universe rested on their success, refused to give up. She oversaw the construction of the new fleet, a combination of Earth's military ingenuity and the advanced, otherworldly technology shared by the Valkyrie. They had built faster-than-light ships capable of navigating the growing distortions in space, but even these ships were not immune to the dangers of the Shroud. The day of departure was a somber one. As the fleet prepared to launch, Elara stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching as the vessels powered up. The Earth she had spent her life studying, its cities, its oceans, its people, was now a speck in the rearview mirror of history. She had no idea if they would return, or if Earth itself would survive the coming storm. But she knew one thing for certain: they had no other choice. Elara and her team, along with a select group of military officers, were aboard the flagship ship, a vessel that carried both the weight of humanity's future and the hope of countless species that had once thrived across the stars. The journey ahead would take them through regions of space that no human had ever dared to explore. The stars they passed would be different, fading and dimming, warped by the influence of the Shroud. As the fleet traveled through the galaxy, Elara found herself confronting not only the vastness of space but also the weight of responsibility that now fell on her shoulders. She had once been a scientist, a researcher obsessed with the mysteries of the universe, but now she was a leader in a fight for survival. Her heart weighed heavy with the knowledge that every decision she made could mean the difference between life and annihilation. Weeks passed as the fleet ventured deeper into the unknown, passing through gravitational anomalies that bent time and space in unpredictable ways. The crew on board had little rest, constantly recalibrating the ship's systems to adapt to the shifting conditions. Some ships began to experience strange malfunctions, as the very fabric of reality seemed to rebel against their presence. It was clear that the closer they got to the heart of the Shroud's influence, the more unpredictable and dangerous the journey became. One day, as the fleet approached the coordinates given by the Valkyrie, a strange occurrence rocked the flagship. The ship's instruments began to malfunction, and the stars outside the observation windows flickered, as though the universe itself were stuttering. Elara stood at the command center, her mind racing. This wasn't just a random glitch, this was the Shroud's influence. It was closing in on them. "We need to adjust course," one of the engineers reported, his voice filled with panic. "We're too close to the anomaly. If we don't move, we'll be caught in it." Elara took a deep breath. There was no time to lose. They couldn't afford to be delayed, not now. "How long do we have?" she asked, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her. "Not long," the engineer responded, glancing at his readouts. "A matter of hours, maybe minutes. If we don't break through this distortion, we'll be pulled into a singularity." The thought of being consumed by an all-encompassing black hole was terrifying, but Elara's mind raced back to the mission at hand. The artifact, the key to saving everything, was somewhere on that distant planet. They couldn't turn back now. The future of the universe depended on it. "Recalibrate the engines for a faster jump," she ordered. "We'll punch through the anomaly and get to the planet. I'll take responsibility for any consequences." The crew scrambled to follow her orders, but Elara could feel the tension in the air. Everyone on board understood what was at stake. There was no room for failure. As the fleet adjusted course and prepared for a faster-than-light jump, Elara watched as the stars outside began to warp and twist. The fabric of space seemed to tear around them, the very laws of nature bending to the will of the Shroud. For a moment, she feared they would not make it. But then, with a sudden lurch, the ship broke through the distortion, and the fleet found itself entering a new system, a system untouched by the Shroud's influence. The planet they sought was now in sight, a barren, rocky world orbiting a dim star. They had arrived. But the true battle had only just begun. The artifact lay on that planet, hidden somewhere in its desolate landscape, and the Shroud was still coming. There was no time to waste. Elara took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. The survival of humanity, and perhaps all life in the galaxy, rested on what they would find on that planet. The barren planet was a silent witness to the arrival of Earth's fleet. Its surface was covered in jagged cliffs and deep ravines, a desolate landscape untouched by time. The ship's sensors indicated no signs of life, but the data from the Thalkiri suggested that this was the place, the planet where the artifact capable of resisting the Shroud lay hidden. The fleet moved cautiously into orbit, preparing for the dangerous descent to the surface. Elara stood at the helm of the flagship, her gaze fixed on the rugged planet below. She could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. This was the moment when everything could change, or when everything could end. She had no illusions about the risks involved. The Shroud was still out there, its pull growing stronger by the hour, and every minute spent on the planet's surface could be a minute too long. The fleet's landing party, a combination of elite soldiers and scientists, prepared for the expedition. Elara, along with a small team, would be among the first to set foot on the planet. They were equipped with the best technology humanity had to offer, including advanced environmental suits and weapons designed to deal with whatever threats they might face. As the landing craft descended through the atmosphere, Elara looked out the viewport, her mind racing. The Thalkiri had given them as much information as they could, but the planet had been abandoned long ago. The artifact could be anywhere. It was a needle in a cosmic haystack, and time was not on their side. The landing was smooth, though the impact kicked up clouds of dust and debris. The team quickly disembarked, their boots crunching against the rocky surface. The planet's sky was a dull gray, the faint light of a distant, dying star casting an eerie glow over the landscape. The air was thin, and the temperature fluctuated wildly. It was a harsh, unforgiving world, yet, it was their only hope. Elara led the way, her eyes scanning the terrain for any sign of the artifact. The Thalkiri's records had described a structure, a massive ruin buried beneath the planet's surface. But over the centuries, the landscape had changed, and what had once been a thriving hub of ancient technology was now little more than a forgotten relic of a bygone age. "We have to split up," Elara said, turning to the team. "We don't have the luxury of time. Stay in constant communication, and if you find anything, report back immediately." The team nodded, each member equipped with a communication device linked to the ship. They spread out, each group heading in a different direction. The harsh landscape seemed to stretch on forever, devoid of any recognizable landmarks. The wind howled, carrying with it the faintest whispers of long-lost secrets. As Elara moved further into the desolate terrain, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the universe pressing down on her. Every step she took felt like a step further from Earth, from everything she knew. She was no longer just a scientist, she was a soldier in a war against an unknowable force. The lives of everyone she cared about, everyone she had ever known, were now tied to this moment. The group's progress was slow. The planet's surface was treacherous, with deep crevasses and shifting rock formations that made navigation difficult. Despite the advanced technology at their disposal, they were forced to move carefully, avoiding dangerous areas where the ground seemed ready to collapse beneath their feet. Each member of the team kept a sharp eye on their surroundings, alert for any signs of danger. Hours passed, and the silence of the planet became overwhelming. The only sounds were the crunch of boots on the rocky ground and the faint hum of the communication devices in their helmets. Elara's mind wandered back to Earth. How were they holding up? Was the Shroud growing stronger even now? She couldn't afford to think about it. She had a mission to complete. Then, as the team approached a particularly deep ravine, one of the soldiers called out. "We found something." Elara's heart raced as she hurried toward the sound of the voice. When she arrived at the edge of the ravine, she found the soldier staring down into the darkness. A long-forgotten structure lay buried beneath the surface, its jagged ruins jutting out from the rock like the bones of some ancient creature. Elara's breath caught in her throat. This was it, the structure the Thalkiri had spoken of. They had found the artifact, or at least the place where it was hidden. The structure was massive, far larger than anything human architecture had ever achieved. It seemed to pulse with a strange energy, as if it were alive, waiting to be awakened. The team quickly set to work, using specialized equipment to carefully excavate the entrance. The structure appeared to be ancient, its walls covered in strange markings that no one on Earth could decipher. But Elara felt a strange pull toward it, as though the building itself were calling to her, beckoning her to uncover its secrets. As the entrance was cleared, the team moved inside, stepping into the cool, dark corridors of the structure. The air was thick with dust, and the walls seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Elara's team moved cautiously, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls. It was clear that no one had been here for millennia. The deeper they went into the structure, the stronger the sense of urgency grew. Elara's mind raced with the possibilities. Could this artifact truly be the key to stopping the Shroud? Was it a weapon, a tool, or something more mysterious, something humanity could not yet comprehend? After what felt like an eternity, they reached the heart of the structure. In the center of a vast chamber, bathed in the faint light of the distant star, stood a pedestal. Upon it rested an object, something both alien and familiar, a hybrid of technology and something far beyond human understanding. It shimmered with a strange energy, its surface reflecting the light in ways that defied logic. Elara stepped forward, her hand reaching out toward the artifact. As her fingers brushed against its surface, a pulse of energy shot through her, and the room seemed to shift. The walls trembled, and a deep hum filled the air. It was as though the artifact was alive, responding to her presence. Then, a voice echoed through her mind, a voice not her own, yet familiar. "Welcome, Chosen One." Elara's heart stopped. She knew this voice. It was the same voice that had spoken through the Thalkiri transmission, the one that had told humanity it was the last hope. The artifact was not just a tool, it was a sentient being, and it had been waiting for her. "We are ready," the voice said. "You must now choose." The room grew darker, the air thickening with the weight of the choice before her. Elara's hand hovered over the artifact, her mind racing. The universe's fate hung in the balance, and the next move would determine everything. Elara's fingers hovered over the artifact, its surface pulsing with an energy that seemed to resonate with her very being. The voice in her mind, the same one that had spoken through the Thalkiri, echoed again. It was calm, almost soothing, but beneath its serenity was the weight of an unfathomable responsibility. "You must choose, Elara Vance. The fate of your world, and all others, is tied to the decision you make." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. The artifact before her shimmered, the light refracting in strange patterns. Elara felt an overwhelming sense of connection to it, as if the artifact had always been waiting for her. But what was it asking? What was the choice? A cold shiver ran down her spine as she glanced at her team. Their faces were a mix of awe and fear, unsure of what was happening. They had come so far, braving the dangers of space, surviving the distorted gravitational anomalies, and now they stood at the precipice of the greatest decision humanity would ever make. The voice spoke again, its tone now more insistent, more urgent. You will have to make a sacrifice, Elara. A choice that will determine the course of the universe. The Shroud seeks to consume all, and it will not stop until everything is gone. But the artifact can either stand against it, or it can become a weapon, one that will end the Shroud's existence. However, the cost of this weapon is high. Elara's mind raced. The words were cryptic, and her heart pounded in her chest. A weapon. A force powerful enough to destroy the Shroud. Could such a thing exist? And if it did, what kind of weapon could it be? What kind of price would it demand? The artifact hummed, its energy intensifying. The room seemed to close in around her, the walls pressing against her consciousness, as though the very structure of the place were alive. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing on her, the awareness that whatever she chose would not only determine Earth's future but the future of all life in the galaxy. Suddenly, her mind flashed back to Earth. The cities, the people, the faces of those she loved. She thought of the children who had never known a world without the fear of the Shroud, of the generations that had lived and died knowing that the end was coming. She thought of the Thalkiri, the ancient species who had fought so long and hard against the Shroud, only to fail. Could they have been wrong? Could they have missed something, something humanity alone could find? The voice spoke again, its words filled with quiet power. The Shroud is not just a force of destruction, Elara. It is an entity, a living presence, driven by an insatiable hunger. It devours, it destroys, it erases all things. But it is not invincible. There is a way to defeat it, but it will require the unification of all things, of technology, willpower, and sacrifice. The question you must answer is not whether you can stop the Shroud, but whether you are willing to pay the price to do so. A cold sweat broke out on Elara's brow. Sacrifice. She understood now. The artifact's power would not come without consequences. But what price would it demand? Would it require the destruction of the fleet? Would it take the life of someone she loved? Or would it demand something more, something beyond anything she could imagine? She turned to her team, her eyes scanning their faces. Each one of them had their own reasons for being here. They had come together to save Earth, to save the universe. But they had no idea what was at stake now. They couldn't know what she was about to choose. This was her decision, and it was one she could not share. The artifact hummed again, its energy swirling in the air like a living thing. You must decide now, Elara, the voice said, its tone softer, almost pleading. Time is running out. The Shroud grows nearer. The choice is yours alone. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. The weight of the universe was in her hands. She could feel the gravity of the decision pressing on her soul. If she chose to use the artifact as a weapon, she would be unleashing a force so powerful that it might not only destroy the Shroud but everything in its path. It was a risk, a gamble, and there would be no turning back. But if she chose to use the artifact to protect Earth, if she chose the path of defense, there was a chance, just a small chance, that the Shroud might not come for them. But that choice would mean waiting for the Shroud to destroy everything in its wake, until it was too late to act. The consequences were terrifying either way. But she had no time. She had to act. The Shroud was coming. Elara took a deep breath, her mind finally clearing. She looked at her team one last time, knowing they would follow her, whatever choice she made. Then, with a resolute movement, she pressed her hand fully onto the artifact. In that instant, the entire room seemed to explode with light. Energy coursed through her, flooding her senses. She saw visions of the universe, of the Shroud's endless hunger, and of civilizations long since lost to its destructive power. She felt its presence, its consuming void, reaching out to devour everything it touched. But then, something changed. The artifact flared, and Elara felt a surge of power unlike anything she had ever known. It wasn't just energy, it was pure will, pure essence, something far beyond technology. It was the culmination of all the knowledge, all the wisdom, and all the determination that humanity possessed. It was the final resistance, the last spark of hope. The voice returned, now softer, filled with something like gratitude. You have chosen, Elara Vance. You have chosen to protect your world. To protect all worlds. The weapon is now in your hands. Elara's body trembled with the force of the artifact's power. She felt it course through her, binding her to the very heart of the universe itself. She knew now what needed to be done. The Shroud would not win. It would not consume them. Not while there was life, not while there was hope. With the artifact's power, humanity would fight back. They would strike at the heart of the Shroud itself, and they would ensure that the universe would live to see another day. The artifact's power surged through Elara, flooding her mind with visions of an untold future. She could feel the essence of the universe itself, a deep current of life and death, creation and destruction. It was as if she had become a part of the very force that governed the cosmos, her body now a vessel for something far greater than any human mind could comprehend. For a moment, Elara lost herself in the overwhelming flood of energy. The room around her seemed to dissolve, the walls fading into a blur of colors and lights. She was no longer on the desolate planet, no longer part of the fleet that had traveled so far to find this ancient artifact. She was everywhere, across the galaxy, in the stars, at the heart of every living thing. The Shroud, the looming darkness that had once seemed so invincible, now seemed like a distant memory, something far smaller than she had ever imagined. But the clarity came quickly. The power, the knowledge, the purpose, it all settled within her, a weight that grounded her once more. The voice of the artifact echoed in her mind again, a soft whisper. You now hold the power to rewrite the fate of the universe, Elara Vance. The Shroud is no longer an insurmountable force. It is a force that can be controlled, subdued, and ultimately destroyed. The weapon is not merely destruction, but the return of balance, the restoration of life. Elara's mind raced. A weapon? Not just to obliterate, but to restore? The possibilities were beyond her wildest dreams. She had thought she would be forced to choose between total annihilation of the Shroud and protecting humanity. But now, it seemed the artifact offered something else entirely, a chance to reshape the universe, to give it another chance. We must act now, Elara whispered, though the words were not entirely her own. The power of the artifact filled her senses, shaping her thoughts. We can stop the Shroud, yes. But more than that, we can bring balance. We can protect the future. Her team watched in stunned silence, awe and fear evident in their eyes as they witnessed the transformation before them. The artifact had given Elara more than just power, it had given her the vision to understand the true scale of the universe's conflict. This was no longer just a battle for Earth, or even for survival. It was a war to preserve the very fabric of life in the galaxy, to ensure that the cycle of destruction and creation could continue. The Shroud was but a part of that cycle, and now it would be forced to stop. Elara's voice, calm and resolute, filled the chamber. We must return to the fleet. The Shroud is closing in on Earth, but now we have the power to push it back. This is our moment. With a single gesture, the artifact's energy rippled outward, forming a beam of light that pulsed with unimaginable power. It shot upward, tearing through the ceiling of the ancient structure and reaching into the sky. Elara's team stared in awe as the beam continued to grow, its energy surging with the force of 1,000 suns. It was as though the artifact was calling to the very heart of the galaxy, a beacon of hope, a signal that the final stand had begun. The team wasted no time. They raced back to the landing craft, their hearts pounding with anticipation. The air felt charged with the intensity of what they had just witnessed. As they ascended into the sky, the distant stars appeared to flicker, as though acknowledging the artifact's power. The Shroud, too, seemed to stir, its presence felt across the galaxy, aware that something had changed. The fleet, still in orbit, received the signal. Elara's voice crackled through the communications system, amplified by the artifact's influence. This is it, Elara said, her voice filled with unwavering confidence. We now have the power to face the Shroud. prepare for battle. The fleet moved swiftly, its ships now operating at a speed and precision they had never thought possible. The Thalkiri's technology, fused with Earth's own advances, had made this final mission possible. The ships were armed with powerful energy weapons, their hulls reinforced with the material from the artifact itself. The fleet was not just a collection of ships anymore, it was a unified force, a symbol of the collective will of all the civilizations that still existed in the galaxy. As the fleet neared Earth, the Shroud loomed closer. Its massive tendril stretched across the stars, blotting out the light and consuming all in its path. It was a vast, unknowable force, like a cosmic storm that threatened to engulf everything it touched. But now, Elara knew, it could be stopped. The artifact's power had given her the ability to alter the fabric of reality itself, to challenge the Shroud in ways no one had thought possible. The final battle began. The ships engaged the Shroud's tendrils with a ferocity that took the universe by surprise. Energy blasts ripped through the void, tearing apart the dark matter that made up the Shroud's form. The alien energy, once unstoppable, now faced a resistance it could not comprehend. The fleet's weapons, infused with the artifact's power, tore through the Shroud's defenses like they were nothing more than smoke. But even as the battle raged on, Elara knew that this was not just a fight of firepower. The true weapon was the artifact itself, the very energy that flowed through her. It was not just a weapon of destruction, it was a weapon of balance. She could feel it now, the delicate harmony of life and death, creation and destruction, all converging within her. She was not merely fighting for survival, she was fighting to restore the universe, to prevent it from falling into eternal darkness. And as the fleet's weapons tore through the Shroud's defenses, Elara released the final surge of power from the artifact. The energy spiraled out in a wave of light, illuminating the entire galaxy. It was as if the universe itself had exhaled, the Shroud's influence shattering, its grip loosening. The battle was over. The Shroud, once an unstoppable force of annihilation, was gone. The galaxy was saved. Earth had become the final hope of the universe, and humanity had not only survived but had triumphed. Elara stood on the observation deck of the flagship, watching as the last remnants of the Shroud were swept away by the artifact's energy. The stars shone brightly once more, their light undimmed by the encroaching darkness. The universe had been saved, and humanity had proven that even in the face of unimaginable destruction, they could rise above. Elara felt a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the cost had been high, but the future was worth it. Earth had become the beacon of hope, and with the power of the artifact, humanity had ensured that no darkness could ever again threaten the galaxy. The universe, once on the brink of destruction, was now a place of possibility once more. And Elara Vance had been the one to turn the tide.